So as you can tell, I'm back at the Stony Point Battlefield, and when I made that documentary on Stony Point last year, as if you remember, I had the battlefield all to myself. There was really no action going on, but now today it's pretty crowded and there's a lot of action and reenactments going on around me, so I decided to document it a little bit and show you around. It's really fascinating. I'm glad I came here today. I'm very lucky to see this in person and, learn a little bit about history, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Well, hello.
What's up?
I am portraying the typical responsibilities of a man in Colonial America by repairing my own garment.
Oh yeah?
Absolutely. But since you're here, why don't I show you some of the items that a Continental Soldier, private, and sergeant would have had.
Awesome.
First, we have our shoes. These shoes are incredibly heavy. You can't feel it, obviously, from where you're seeing this, but there's a very heavy horseshoe here. These shoes weigh about 5 to 10 pounds. Getting up this hill that you've seen, very hard in one of these shoes. If a guy was lucky enough to have shoes, he was given an item known as an ice creeper, which turns this very cumbersome and heavy shoe into an even heavier shoe with 4 spikes that might maybe give you a little bit more durability on the ice and snow. I personally wouldn't want to have to be relying on one of them. Some buttons that the various regiments would have had in the American Revolution. We have our 10th Massachusetts Regiment button, we have our British Royal Artillery button, and we have the Continental USA button. And a fascinating fact about the Continental USA button is its first recorded use of 1775. An entire year before the Declaration of Independence was signed, groups of colonists were thinking about themselves as a United States and not just a series of colonies. Now, on the series and topics of misconceptions, a lot of people believed that the Continental Army was responsible for making their own musket balls. This was not the case. It was a primary function of the militia. And here at the Stony Point Battlefield, before the British invaded, the Haverstraw militia had a blockhouse located near our lighthouse now, and their days were probably spent making musket balls in this fashion. You have a 2-pour point ladle, you have a block of lead. You heat your block of lead up over the 2-pour point ladle, and then you begin to pour it into a cast. Now, as soon as you begin pouring this molten lead into the cast, it's already beginning to solidify, but the last step would be to open it up over a bucket of water, and out would come a musket ball. Now, everybody's got to eat, and Continental Soldiers were no exception. They had hybrid bowls/plates, as most privates were eating soups and stews that they needed to be able to scrape up the side and get into their mouth. They didn't have a lot of good supplies, so they were eating with horn spoons and wood spoons. And finally, gambling, a great pastime. If you could read or write, you'd be a sergeant. You would have access to this stuff over here, which maybe we'll show you in another video. But if you didn't, you didn't know how to read and write. If we put a number 4 on this, you would have no idea what this card meant. So the sergeants who were smart wanted to be able to take money from anybody, so they didn't put numbers on the cards. That's all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's really cool.
Today I'm baking one of
Cannon.
President Washington's favorite breakfast when he was at Mount Vernon.
Oh, what was that?
His wife's recipe for a Virginia spoon bread.
Oh, cool.
Which is essentially like a cornbread pudding, really. And the French ambassador who was visiting the Washingtons at one point said George ate large bowls of this cornmeal spoon bread with swimming in butter, cream, and maple syrup. I've never made it before, so who knows whether it'll work or not. I'm about to lift up my pot top and see.
Nice.
Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look as brown as I thought it would get, but we're getting there. So in the beginning of the war, these iron pots, which weigh a ton, were what the men were given. And they complained they were just too heavy. And they started abandoning them on the side of the road. A woman, one of the letters she wrote in like 1779 to her cousin says, you can tell the movement of the army by the iron pots that are discarded along the way. And so then they started giving them these tin boilers. And the boilers were a lot lighter and easier to carry because the men were required to carry their own kitchen equipment. There would be 4 to 6 of them in what they called a mess.
Okay.
They would sleep 4 to 6 in those little tents, and whenever they got rations, they'd put it all in their pot and put it on the fire, and whatever they got, that's what they ate. And they were very grateful for it because both sides were very hungry throughout the war. They never really had enough rations.
I can tell.
This is what the soldiers ate more commonly. This is called fire cake. It's literally just flour and water mixed together, slapped on the side of a rock that I moved up next to the fire. It gets burnt on one side and sometimes it's raw on the other. And the soldiers didn't like it, but it kept them alive.
Wow. So these are all like all the meals that the soldiers would eat?
Well, these were what they were told they would get as rations, but it very rarely happened. They just never had enough food either side. So the commanders would send the men out to what they called forage, which really meant steal what you can find. And I think they probably figured it was the populace's duty to support their army, whether you were wanting to stay with the king and remain loyal or whether you wanted liberty, you needed to help, is their feeling. So they didn't think it was a terrible thing to take food. Of course, it meant that you had a very long, hard winter without any.
Yeah.
But it was, both sides did it, know, and Washington didn't like it. He, tried to talk against it, but it happened.
Yeah, no, I got you.
What you see in front of you are a depiction of a blacksmith area that would be portable. So it consists of a bellows, a forge, and an anvil. Those are the 3 major parts. And all you see is a few wisps of smoke. But watch when I start pumping the bellows. In a very short amount of time, you can see even more smoke. And now some flames are coming up just because I'm infusing air into the fire. So what do I need to do? I need to reheat it in order to make it soft again. So the process of forming things is heating, hammering, until you reach the desired shape that you want. So once I reach the temperature I want, I start to form the metal by hammering it. I've taken the bar that was square-ended and I've pointed it. What I'm making for you is a nail, because it's one of the quickest things I can make. So now I'm going to determine how long I want my nail. It depends on how long a nail my customer asked me to make. And then I would make it to accommodate the order. So I'm making a short nail here. And it's now tapered on all four sides to the point. This is like a 4-penny nail. In other words, for 100 of these, I would charge you 4 pence for 100. Now it has to fit into this tool. This is called a header. So there's the length of my nail. I'm going to cut it off and I'm going to hammer the head. Now I cut it off with the tool again that I've made. And that's called a hardy. Looks like a chisel. Break it off. And then hammer the head. The last 4 strokes are intentionally on an angle to give it some design.
So there's one more station that I have yet to visit here, but unfortunately it's pretty packed, and there's going to be a cannon going off in about 20 minutes, so I'll document that. I think I may just pass on the final station, unfortunately, because it's getting later on in the afternoon and I ought to get back home soon. So yeah, hopefully the cannon is pretty cool.
Anybody want to guess how far a 6-pound ball with a full 2 pounds of powder will travel? A mile? 2 miles? 3 miles? 5? Now we're just going up now.
10 yards. 10 feet?
The closest is a mile, about a mile and a sixth, or 1.06 miles. So about a third of the way out to Dunderberg Mountain there. But reasonably, at that distance, a cannon is a smooth bore. So the farther the ball goes, the farther the trajectory will differentiate from where it came out of the muzzle.
Okay, come with me. Am I doing it again? Oh, I want to hear it this time. No. Are you hearing it? Well, I'm not deaf. Oh, but got him.